start this. Megan Kelly is a Martin County native who's now teaching in High Point?
Close to it, Thomasville.
Thomasville.
Same thing.
Okay. But she is going to be talking about genealogy, which is a favorite sideline of hers. She is also very interested in, I want to get a little bit of a snicker when I say this, cemeteries. But no, seriously, she's done a lot of work on cemeteries. She really knows this stuff, and I've learned an awful lot. But anyway, today she will be doing our presentation. Thank you for coming. Megan, you're up.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here this morning. Welcome, welcome. It's lovely to see you all on this fine and frigid winter morning. Hope you all are bundling up and staying warm. But we're going to go ahead and get started with our presentation for the day. Part of the presentation is going to be focused on how to get started with your family tree, how to be organized, how to store things, and a variety of other related family tree and genealogy topics. There will also be another section of the presentation that focuses on the daughters and sons of the American Revolution and how to go about doing an application for them. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. Okay. So I usually like to put a little agenda up here for everybody just to kind of take a look at what we're going to be discussing. So if you want to just take a second and look at that, or if you even want to take a picture of it just so that you can keep up with where we're at in the presentation, that's fine as well.
I turned my phone off. It's taking a sweet
You're fine. Take your time. Say we got all the time in the world. All right, so before we jump in, if you have any questions at any point in time, please feel free to stop me and let me know. I will go ahead and let you know that this DNA section right here of the presentation, I have actually moved that out because that's not a topic that we're going to be particularly focused on today. But if you do have questions related to DNA and how that relates to genealogy and so on and so forth, please don't hesitate to ask. I'm more than happy to answer those questions for you, give you any tips or advice I possibly can. And I think that should be about everything. So we're going to go ahead and hop on in. So a quick little bit of information about myself. I am a full-time high school teacher up in Thomasville, close to High Point in Greensboro. Genealogy is something that I've really always been interested in. I also do love cemetery hunting and documentation and things like that, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But this is something that I kind of do just in my free time. It started out as a hobby. I've been doing it since I was a kid, and it really just kind of transformed into more than just a side hobby. So now this is something that I do professionally. I am seeking professional certification. There is a process for that, and hopefully I'll be able to complete that soon. So I'm working on that. These are two quotes that I particularly like when it comes to genealogy. The first one is, everybody dies twice. Once when your body dies, and once the last time your name is ever said. Which I think is particularly poignant. The other is history remembers the famous, genealogy remembers them all. And how true that is. So let's talk really quickly about what genealogy is, because a lot of the time people hear the word genealogy and most people do not really know what that is or what a genealogist is. So, first and foremost, it is the account of the descent of a person, family, or group from an ancestor or older forms, or the study of family pedigrees. Very straightforward, that's the dictionary definition essentially. Okay. What a genealogist does, they research and create family trees and pedigrees. They translate and transcribe documents from other languages or Old Cursive, because as we all know, Old Cursive is in itself a language. They also find supporting or lost documents and can find and confirm ancestry and family stories. They can clarify DNA reports and find appropriate testing if that is something that you're interested in. They also help to find biological family and find and confirm potential hereditary medical conditions. And they can also help find lost grave sites and headstones. And we'll talk a little bit about all of these things. Actually, Wayne, I'm going to temporarily just move around a little bit just so I can see things. Okay. All right, so let's talk a little bit about starting your family tree. Hopefully my mouse will still work. Hey, there we go. All right, so starting your family tree, some tips and tricks. So first thing, you should always start with yourself if that wasn't already obvious. Start with yourself. Start with the things that you know to be true, right? Work backwards, okay? There's a reason that family trees tend to look like the one in the picture here. Obviously, these boxes on the tree are blank, but you can tell they all kind of come down to a singular focal point. There's a reason for that. That focal point at the bottom of the tree should be you, okay? And the two above it should be your parents, the four above that should be your grandparents, so on and so forth. Record all dates and places of all major life events, okay? And again, like I said, start with the things that you know to be true, things that you have seen for yourself, heard for yourself in your lifetime, okay? Like if Grandma says that her grandfather was born in 1855, right? Well, obviously you weren't alive at that point in time. You didn't see that, you didn't know that. So we're going based off of Grandma's information, right? Grandma could be right. She could very well have that information correct, and that would be great. Sometimes information is not always correct. So we have to start off with what we know, because that builds a solid foundation. Okay. Interview your older relatives. I just had a family member of mine, a cousin of mine, reach out. She's taking care of an uncle who is now in his 90s and still has a good mind and still has a great memory. And she texted me the other day and she said, hey, he's at my house right now. Do you want to ask him any particular questions about the family? And I said, ask him everything. Write it all down. Like right now. But yes, please interview your older relatives. Get those family stories written down. A lot of people don't do that sort of thing anymore, unfortunately, and we really, really should. Gather those stories and documents and photos. Don't wait until you have to suddenly go through a loved one's leftover belongings after they pass. Don't wait till that point in time to start getting those things together and preserving them. Do it now, ideally. Especially, while those people who have those things in their possession are still here and can hopefully still help you identify people in pictures and help you understand where a particular thing came from or what it was for, any information they might have, because once they're gone, all the knowledge and memories that they have are also gone. Focus on one branch of the family at a time. It is very easy to get distracted. When you're working on a family tree, it is very easy to work on one particular branch and then you see, oh, well, there's this other person that's like married into this branch of the family. well, this looks interesting, I don't know anything about them, let me go look at this really quick. Oh, well, now here's this other person, and another person. Yeah, and so on and so forth, right? So it's very easy to get distracted and off topic. I've been there before. It's the rabbit hole, family tree rabbit hole. So check the backs of photos in old family Bibles. Those are a wealth of information, in addition to the older members of your family, right? My grandmother passed almost 3 years ago to the day, and after she passed, we had to go through all of her belongings, her photos and old documents and everything. And to me, that was a treasure trove, right? I mean, just so much information. But there were pictures from the 40s and 50s of people that I never heard of, never saw before, never knew anything about them. There were names on the backs of them, and I was like, I've never heard this name before, don't know who this is. And my mom was like, oh, well, that's Aunt Duck, or that's, Uncle Jonas. And I'm like, why have I never heard of these people before, right? These are my grandmother's, like, brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles, and I've never seen pictures of them, never met them. And unfortunately, she's not around anymore for me to ask her about them, and they're not either, which is really sad, but that's how it goes. So my point is, ask the people that you have about these things while you can. Family Bibles are wonderful, a wonderful, wonderful resource. Lots of times we've seen, these old tome of a Bible, that are roughly this thick. Usually in the front and the back they'll have some kind of a paper or family tree that tells you when everybody was born, when they died, when they got married. It may even contain old documents. Hey, come on in. Info from other family trees, like let's say for example, if you are using something akin to Ancestry to do your family tree, which is what a lot of people do because it's free, it's easy. If you're doing that, importing that information from the other family trees should really only be used as a last resort. Okay, and there's a reason that I say that. We're going to talk about accuracy of the information, but using that information and importing that info on Ancestry from somebody else's family tree should not be a first source of information, and we'll talk about why. Back up everything, all your documents, all your photos, all your stories, written down information, anything that you find online, store it, back it up somewhere, okay? And we're going to talk about the best ways to do that as well. Okay. Preservation. This is a big one. I'm all about preservation. Like I said, record the things that you already know. You want to start off with a solid foundation, right? It's just like building a house. If you don't have a solid foundation, what's going to happen to your house? Eventually it's going to start to crumble and it's going to fall apart, right? Same thing here. Make copies of everything. Have copies on your copies, right? And I can't tell you how many times I have seen, unfortunately, a house will burn to the ground or be flooded, and all of a sudden, all those old family photos and documents are gone, and they're not back up anywhere. Keep them safe, and we'll talk about proper storage. Preserve those original documents and photos. Have you guys ever seen those old photo albums from the 50s and 60s where they had a clear page on the top that you could peel back, and then they had like a sticky, yeah. They're in terrible shape now, right? They looked great at the time. This was a new big thing, new big way to, store your photos, and now unfortunately we're finding that you can't remove those photos from those pages because the photo will be destroyed, right? Or they yellow, right? So ultimately, they were great at the time, they're not so great now, okay? There are photo storage boxes. You can get these at Walmart, on Amazon, at Michael's, or Hobby Lobby. They're specifically made for square and rectangular photo storage. They're water and air tight, which is amazing, and it is one of the best ways that you could possibly store your photographs. Please handle any old documents and photos with extreme care. I had this one old photo of my second great-grandparents that I found in my grandmother's closet after she passed. And I was absolutely amazed at this photo, right? It was stuck inside of this old, it was kind of like a clear plastic upright kind of thing. It was meant to be put on display, very simple, right? But unfortunately, this was an old black and white original photo from 1901, and there was no way for me to pull this out of the plastic display thing. And so I had to leave it there. Somebody had gone around and taped around it with clear duct tape so that it wouldn't fall out. And so now there's duct tape residue on the edges of the photo. And I don't want to risk ruining the picture. So I just leave it inside the display. That's really all I can do at this point. But make sure you handle those with care. Make sure your hands are clean when you touch those photos. And if there's anything sticky on it, or if there's any kind of like stains or anything, if you do try to clean them, of course, make sure you do so, with Q-tips and very, very lightly. Don't bear down, don't put anything wet on them, so on and so forth. Basic common sense kind of stuff. Let's talk about the how, right? Write down all those things that you know, put them somewhere on paper. That's the important part, right? Because it can live in your head all day long, rent-free, and that's great. But if that's the case, does anybody else have that information? No. So write down everything you possibly can, okay? Use a storage software, or use an online website that can store that information for you. For example, Ancestry, right? Everything gets stored on that website. Whatever you put into your tree is automatically saved and stored, and it will be there as long as that site is still online, okay? They also just recently, as of a few days ago, came out with a new storage kit that you can purchase from them. I think I want to say it's $30 or $40, something like that. And you get all of these things to help you preserve your family documents and photos, which is amazing, because there's not a lot of companies that offer that sort of thing. So do take a look into that. Be careful when making copies of things. I have seen people who had the best intentions when they were making the copies, and unfortunately they went to go put this old, parchment paper into the scanner at the top of the copy machine, and so it got pulled through the copy machine and absolutely destroyed. So do just keep that in mind. Also, some older documents at this point may be so old that they can't handle being touched. They may just crumble to pieces, right? Or even if they're exposed to air or sunlight in some cases, that may also destroy them. It depends on what quality the paper was and how old they are. So just keep those things in mind. Be mindful of your storage. This is something else I've mentioned later on in the presentation, but I'm going to go ahead and say this now. Please, please, please do not store your documents and photos and things solely on your computer. I have seen a lot of people who have done that, have stored it just on their computer and nowhere else, and then unfortunately the computer goes bad somehow, and all of a sudden all the work that they've put into it, all the things that they have stored are just gone and they can't be retrieved.
Lightning strike.
Yes, that will do it.
Took hours out.
Yep, that'll absolutely do it. So my recommendation would be, obviously, find a proper way to store your physical copies of everything, but if you've got those digital copies, you can store them on your computer, that's fine. Just don't let that be the only place that you store it. Have a backup somewhere, a USB drive, an external hard drive. You can even store things on the cloud, right? There are lots of different ways that you can do that. And like I said earlier, when I said have copies for your copies, have a backup for your backup, because things happen, we know that. And do not preserve stuff in a harmful way, right? So like I was talking earlier about the photo album from the 50s with the sticky back on it. So we know now, obviously, that's not the thing to do, right? Because generations down the road, it's not looking so great, we can't remove it, we can't do anything with it, it's stuck there, and that's all there is to it, right? So we don't want to preserve stuff in a harmful way. Hey, come on in. Okay, let's talk about managing your documents. So raise your hand real quick if you have a ton of family tree and family history documents at your house right now. Yes. Okay, so how do you all generally store your documents? How do you tend to arrange or organize your documents? Let me just ask you that.
Boxes.
Boxes, yeah, that's very common.
Bags.
Bags, yeah. Okay, so yes, that is by and large generally what we tend to do. And we know full well that that is not the way to do it, but we still do it anyway, right? So, my personal favorite is the use of a 3-ring binder. Okay. Now, if you have a photocopy of something and you're able to hole punch it and just stick it right there in the binder, that's great. If it's an older document and you don't want to damage it, then I would recommend getting a protective sleeve cover that you can just slip that document right down into and then put it in your binder. Now, obviously, if you encounter something like natural disasters, flood, fire, things like that, a binder is obviously not going to protect your documents, right? In that event, I would say any original, older documents that are precious to you, if they're not photocopies or things like that, I would definitely keep those in a fire-safe box for sure. Try not to fold them up if you can possibly help it, but if you have to resort to that, I would rather it be folded in a fire-safe box than not be folded and in a binder and then be potentially lost, right? But I organize most of my stuff that is not an original document in a 3-ring binder with protective sleeves. That helps me get everything together. It helps me display things easier and find stuff quicker. You can also obviously use filing cabinets with labeled folders. I've seen that as well. It takes a little bit longer to get through that sort of thing, but that's okay. You can use labeled tab dividers in your binders, and I really should have brought mine in this morning to use as an example here. But I like to use tab dividers that have the surnames from each branch of the family. So usually I'll start at the top of the tree and just go all the way down branch by branch and list each label from top to bottom with that surname of that branch. Okay. And that way I can just flip right to the part of the family that I need to look at. We talked about this, save your digital documents on the cloud, a USB or other digital storage like an external hard drive. Don't save your digital documents only to your computer's internal storage, that's a big no. All right, so let's talk about some unknowns. So first of all, we said start with yourself and work backwards, right? Start at the last point of information that you know to be true, okay? Like I said, this is stuff that you can verify because you were there, you saw it take place, you were alive when it happened, and you experienced it, right? That is your last point of reference. Okay. Verify all of your information. Please, please, please do not blindly accept all information as true, okay? Just because it's been printed or just because it's on the internet does not make it so, as we are aware.
Ma'am, yesterday I was looking through Find a Grave, and there was a gentleman who passed away, and he was identified as the son. His daddy's name was James Arthur Mazzeo Sr. Well, there was James A. Mazzeo in the same county and had him attached as his father, who was not, and I followed that right until I found out later, and I had to do some
Untangling, yes.
because
Yes.
I had already put it on Find a Grave.
Right, and unfortunately, that is very common. I've run into that more times than I even care to think about. And I've had to do a lot of untangling of those sorts of things myself, both on Ancestry and Find a Grave, which is part of the reason that I say, you know, please don't blindly accept information. Use those other family trees as a last resort for info, because unfortunately we're all human and we get things wrong, and that's just how it goes. People on Ancestry and on Find a Grave can make duplicates of people's memorials. And so one of the biggest things that I have run into on both of those sites is that I would come across some kind of documentation that has been put in, and I can't actually see any kind of a document for this person, but I've got 2, 3, 4 different listings, all with the same name, all with the same dates, but there will be a slight differentiation between all 4 of them. And so I have to sit there and figure out, okay, are any of these the same person? Are they all different people? What's going on here? So sometimes when you come across stuff like that, you do have to be very specific. You do have to do a lot of research and just verify, make doubly sure that everything matches up. Because if all the documentation is not matching, there's a pretty good chance that we've got different people, right? So just make sure you've got the right person that you're looking for. Like I was saying on this last point here, do avoid importing information. Ancestry.com family trees are a good backup source, and I use them myself, but unfortunately they're subject to human error, like I was saying. Only accept hints with good citation and documentation. You really ideally want to be able to see the actual document, right? So most of the time with Ancestry, you're not going to be able to see a lot of the documents unless you have a paid subscription, and they have several different tiers that are available. But if I can't see the document that information is coming from, I'm not going to use it. I want to be able to see the document. I want to be able to read it for myself. Unfortunately, even if somebody has transcribed the information on the document, people transcribe things incorrectly too. So I want to lay eyes on it for myself and be able to see that that information is 100% correct. Okay. So let's talk about dates, okay? So here we have a timeline, and on the left side, 1877, great-grandpa was born. Okay, that's great. 1901, grandpa was born. Okay? 1985, great-grandpa has died, so he would have been 84. Or actually, excuse me, great-grandpa. He would have been well over 100 at that point. Okay, so there's that. And then in 1999, dad is born. Okay, so we've got great-grandpa, grandpa, and then dad. Okay. Something about these dates is not adding up. What is it here that's not adding up?
Grandpa was 98, but the son was born.
Right, right. So clearly there is a discrepancy here, okay? So, what could be the case is that maybe somebody just got a date wrong, right? It could just be a simple typo, right? Or it could be that maybe we have an entirely incorrect person. Maybe the date for the person was correct, but maybe that's not actually the person we thought it was. So, like I was saying, double check and make sure that the person you're looking at is the person you're needing to look at. And pro tip on this one, if something seems off or suspicious about dates or names or places, things like that, trust your gut. Most of the time I would say go with your gut, because if you've already gotten a lot of your family information together and you've been the one who's been organizing it and looking at it a lot, you're going to be the person who knows it best, right? So if you come across a date or place or some kind of information and you're like, hey, something about this does not look right to me, trust your gut. Okay, let's talk about sources. I do love a good source. So there are different types of sources. We have first degree sources, which are things that come from us, things that we have seen and heard and experienced for ourselves, right? That is Usually good, concrete, solid information, and that's what we want to start with, that's what we want to use as our foundation, right? We don't want secondhand information. Usually that's not as reliable, right? Good sources would be things like original signed documents. Okay? Even if you can't get your hands on the original document, at least a photo, a clear photo of the original document would be great. Family Bibles, like I was saying earlier, they can be a wealth of information. Birth, marriage, and death certificates. Most of us tend to have those sorts of things in our possession for ourselves, our children, our parents, things like that. Even if you don't have those original certificates, you can get those. If you are a immediate family member, direct descendant, genealogist, so on and so forth, you can get those documents at the courthouse in the county that they were originally created at. So do keep that in mind. Diaries, journals, obituaries, and newspaper clippings, those are wonderful things, I love those. Newspapers.com does require a subscription, but if you have an Ancestry subscription, you can actually access newspapers.com through Ancestry, and you'll be able to get any of those obituaries and newspaper clippings. Military records, Fold 4 is a wonderful resource. Fold 3 is a wonderful resource for military documents, both for more modern day veterans and for a lot of the older veterans from the Revolutionary War, Civil War, War of 1812, so on and so forth, right? Wills, deeds, titles, land grants, I love that kind of thing. And we're going to talk a little bit about land grants here in just a minute. But any of these things on this list would be good, valuable, concrete documentation that is worthy of being used for family tree info. Okay, we gotta talk about these old stories. So, we love the family stories, and we love Grandma and Grandpa, but they may not always have the right information. So, we need to verify those things. So, for example, Grandma said that we have Cherokee blood. How many times have y'all heard that? Yep. Okay. So, oftentimes, that is not going to be the case. And that doesn't mean that that's always the case. We're not saying that, we're not calling Grandma a liar, right? But maybe that's what she was told, right? And she's just passing the information down. So, the best way to go about finding out if that sort of information is true, obviously, first is going to be concrete documentation, original documentation. If you can lay your eyes on something that proves that 100%, that's great. If not, you might consider going the DNA route, maybe doing a DNA test to see if anything pops up that can verify those stories. That would be great. If those two things fail, that still doesn't necessarily mean that the information is entirely incorrect, but you might have to take it with a grain of salt and just accept it as a family story. Yes?
The DNA, does that give you a specification of what tribe?
Nowadays, some of them actually do. Ancestry has gotten really comprehensive with their DNA testing. They do have the largest DNA database in the world, and they have done a lot with our Native American tribes to kind of help to sort them out, at least into smaller areas. So yes.
Just wanted to insert there that the regular DNA test that you buy from Ancestry does not show you any kind of Native American connection. You have to ask specifically for
A separate
a
test
separate test
Oh. Okay.
and a more inclusive DNA test.
Okay, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Thank you for that information. Okay, good to know. I'll have to look into that. Okay, so now our presentation here is not on cemetery hunting and documentation, but that is something that I greatly enjoy, and it goes hand in hand with family research and genealogy. So I often find myself in cemeteries a lot of the time, and I look kind of crazy out there poking around with my probe, and people drive by and they're like, "What is she doing? Is she out there digging the graves?" No. I'm hunting for lost headstones and trying to document historic cemeteries and things like that. And my family has been kind enough to humor me and, often comes with me on my cemetery trips and helps me dig up all these old things. But here we have some photos of some of the cemetery stuff that we have come across over the last few years. So the one on the far left here, I know it's a little bit difficult to see, but the sign on the tree in that photo says Hines Cemetery, and that is actually located over in Oak City. That was way back in the woods on the edge of a field, completely not viewable at all from the road. And if you had not been back in the field back there, you would have never known that it existed. And it's a small old family cemetery. Yes.
I live in Oak City. I was wondering if you could tell me where that's at.
Yeah, so I can't give you the exact location, but I can tell you roughly.
Okay.
It is actually on private farming land. It's also on land that is owned by my stepdad's family. But basically, if you're going down, oh gosh, what is that highway that takes you right around that curve?
11?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's 11, thank you.
Okay.
But if you're going down 11, roughly midway down before you get to Oak City, definitely on the outskirts of town, there's a field, which there's a lot of fields. There's a really big field on the left-hand side, and it's got a far-off tree line, and there's a dirt path that kind of runs right down the middle of it. It's basically down there.
Is it only Hines? Is that the only people buried in there?
No, there are other people buried. In fact, that was the next thing I was going to talk
Okay,
about.
all right, thank you.
You said
Yeah.
you were originally from Oak City?
Yes, but I was gone for a very
Do
long
you have
time.
any idea where Hines Road is?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, when you get in Hines, when you come out to the Hines Road, you turn right, there's a big fertilizer place on the
Uh-huh.
right hand side. Okay, when you're on Oak City Highway, if you look right straight in front of you, the path is right in front of that road. You have to go about a mile back up in there, cause you have to go down the field to through the woods about 100 yards. And this field and woods line back there is back in there, like I said, got signs up now.
Okay, great.
And the land
Thank you.
belongs to my cousins Bob and Randy Hyman, if you know them.
Oh, yeah.
Right, it's on one of their farms.
Okay, thank you so much.
And that's how it was discovered, because Mike and his cousins were back there farming, and they knew it was back there. Everybody who's ever been back there has known it was there, but if you've never been back there before, you never would know.
Do you have to get permission to go back there? Like that?
Yeah,
Or in
so
most of these places that are like that?
yes, and that is actually something that I talk about extensively in a separate presentation. But the short answer is yes. Most of the time, if it's a privately owned or if it's on private property, yeah, you don't have to get permission. Now, legally, you do have access to those privately owned cemeteries if you are a state or federal official, if you're a direct descendant of someone buried there, or if you're a genealogist. As long as you get permission from the landowner, but there's a whole caveat to that I talk about.
I think there's a unit also on
Yes.
my property.
Yep.
So you have to get their permission to get some.
So we have lots and lots of hidden cemeteries around eastern North Carolina, just in general, and I won't get too deep into the topic, but we have a lot of stuff like this. They're everywhere. They litter the map. Another photo we have up here, the second one on the left, I don't know if you guys can see it, it actually has the name Juanita Platt. This was found at the Princeville Community Cemetery over by the Tar Road area. That cemetery actually needs quite a lot of work. And I've been out there a few times now. There's a lot to be done out there, just in general, and it is a huge historical cemetery. Go ahead. Yeah, go for it.
In talking about this to some other people, they say, well,
you know, after the flood, they went out there and they cleaned up the Crestwood Cemetery. No, they didn't. They did a basic clean, but there were a lot of headstones washed over, and then, you know, dirt over top of them, as we found out with that one. It was under a lot of soil. There were still plenty of lost graves out there.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that was the case just by and large, as we discovered very quickly. That particular cemetery is on the banks of the Tar River, quite literally. So when Floyd came through and a number of other hurricanes, and you know that area gets flooded very quickly, unfortunately a lot of those headstones got knocked over, washed away, buried under silt and mud, and that one was one of them. Mike actually was the one who found this one out there, digging around with my probe, and so he found that, and we popped it up, and we're just absolutely amazed. And in the photo, it doesn't look very big, but that actually was a large, heavy marble headstone, and it cleaned up very nicely. But she would have been just completely lost to time and the elements, you know, had you not been out there digging around. So we run into stuff like that quite a bit, and you'd be surprised just how far down you can find some of these lost buried headstones, because we found some fairly deep ones. On the right hand side here, the two photos at the top are from the cemetery up in Abbott's Creek, North Carolina, which is in the Piedmont Triad area. There is an old German Revolutionary era cemetery there. It's called Abbott's Creek Primitive Baptist Church Cemetery. It is gorgeous, and it is very unique, one of a kind. And that photo on the top right corner right there is actually a really great example of a lot of the headstones that you will find there. They are made of soapstone, which is also very unique. It is common for the time that they were made in, which was the early to mid 1700s. So they're very old at this point. They are crumbling, and we are losing the information on them. These are so unique because they have the design that they do. It's actually called a pierced headstone, and you can see there's kind of a wheel in the middle. These are very soft, and they're unfortunately just deteriorating. So we are trying to document as many of those as we possibly can. The two photos on the bottom right there of the cracked headstones that have fallen over, those actually came from the Hines Cemetery that we were talking about over in Oak City. When we first walked through that cemetery, you know, obviously we see the obelisk headstones that are standing tall for the family that's buried there. But then we noticed these two that were kind of off to the side. They were right there as you walk into the entrance of the cemetery, and it was kind of hard to immediately tell who these were for, because all they have on them is a first name, and then looks like a birthday, like a birth year and a death year, and that was about it. There wasn't very much identifying information. Come to find out, after some record digging, these were actually the graves of two former slaves. And you know, the cemetery itself, just in general, is definitely in a state of disrepair. It needs to be cleaned, so on and so forth. And these are two in particular that I'm intending to go back out and stand back up and repair those cracks if possible. So that is something we will be doing. But we see a lot of that kind of thing as well, especially in this area.
How do you repair them?
That is a whole other presentation right there. But the short answer is there's a right way and a wrong way to go about it. A lot of people try to use quick drying concrete and things like that. That is definitely a big no-no. Please don't use concrete to repair headstones. But there are certain resins and epoxies, thank you, that's the word I'm looking for, that are made specifically for cemetery and monument repair, and that is something that we can talk about. Okay, what time are we looking at right now?
I'm gonna go get her to come in and start taking the orders.
Okay.
While you continue to talk.
Perfect, okay. Almost 12, okay. So I tell you what, Wayne, if it's okay with you, can we go ahead and break here, because I'm about halfway through. Is that, or do you want me to just keep on trucking?
Well, I'm thinking it's gonna take a while for the food anyway, or
Okay.
to get the, I recommend just kinda
Just
keep
go,
going,
keep
what
on
do y'all
going?
think?
Is that okay with everybody? Just keep
I
on?
mean, if we get out a little bit earlier, that would, you know, teacher let us out early.
Sure, okay. Alright, so this is the next section of.
We're not gonna let the teacher out there, though.
This is the next section of our presentation. So we are gonna talk a little bit about the Sons and Daughters of the American Revolution groups. Do we have anybody here who are members or representatives of either of those? Okay, yep, alright, good, good, so we've got some daughters in the room, okay. So, man, there is a lot that goes into this. So, my other ladies that are here as members and representatives, if I get any of this information incorrect, please just smack me and let me know. So membership requirements, mostly they are the same. There are some subtle differences, and we'll talk a little about that. So, first of all, you must be at least 18 years old, okay? And that is because the application that you're doing has to be for yourself. You have to sign it, the information has to be true and correct, and it has to be legal information. The application info is extensively researched, hunted down, verified by government, by the documents that we're seeing. It has to be absolutely correct, and you have to have all your I's dotted and T's crossed. Okay? You have to be a U.S. citizen, obviously, and you have to have a proven, 100% documented, direct bloodline to a U.S. revolutionary patriot. Okay. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like and what that means. You do have to have all the required documentation, and we're going to talk about what that documentation is. Okay. And your patriot that you're connecting to must have aided the war, the Revolutionary War, somehow. There are caveats to that. Okay, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. And if I need to slow down on any of this, if I'm going too fast, y'all let me know. So let's talk about these required documents. So first of all, you have to have your official birth certificate. And yes, it does have to be an official, signed, sealed, delivered copy of your certificate. It cannot be a photocopy, it can't be a picture. It has to be an official, sealed copy. Okay. You also need your parents' birth and or death certificates. Those also must be official. Okay. So if you're having trouble getting your hands on these documents, you can either go to the local courthouse where they were born or where they died and obtain official copies of those certificates, or you can have the representative from the DAR chapter that you're applying to help you to obtain those documents, because that is what they do. That is part of what they are paid to do. They will help you get hands on that documentation, okay? And they'll do whatever digging is necessary to come up with that info.
Who did you say that would be?
The DAR or SAR representative, anybody like the registrar for that chapter that's helping you get applied, that is what they're paid to do in part, is to help you verify your documents, get hands on official documents, and get the information and the research that you need.
There's no pay.
There's no pay? Oh, well, that's good to know. You can talk a little more.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I am that, and I have no
really?
remorse.
Okay, that's good to know. Okay. I'll have to talk to Laura. Thank you for that. Marriage certificates are also,
What did she say?
she said there's no pay.
No pay?
Yeah, so it's all voluntary.
Okay.
Marriage certificates are also a wonderful wealth of information, and it does help to tie people together. So, like I was saying earlier, certificates, we need those certificates, especially if they're legally binding, okay? Your grandparents' birth or death certificates, in lieu of a birth certificate, because, sometimes depending on when they were born, or maybe it's just not available, maybe they never got a birth certificate. Death certificates with their birth information on it will suffice, right? Sometimes it's just hard to come up with that birth certificate. Further documentation for each generation on the branch is also needed. That can come in the form of a will, a deed, a land grant, a pension application, so on and so forth. Okay? But these are all legally binding documents with official information. It might be handwritten depending on the time. It might even be hard to read or transcribe. Maybe it's in old cursive like we were talking about earlier. Unfortunately, a lot of our students nowadays, they're not taught how to read cursive, and so a lot of those old documents at this point can only be read by people that have been taught.
So what does the further documentation, those things, what does that show them?
So, number one, it shows movements of people and families. So for example, let's say my great-grandfather decided that he was gonna give part of his land to his son-in-law, right, after he married his daughter. Right? That shows movement of land and movement of his daughter and his son-in-law, and then their future family and where they might have been located. So it shows geographical and familial movements. It also shows things that have been passed in wills. And then land grants were legally binding documents. Those are very valuable, especially in the Revolutionary era. They were very common. In fact, I have a copy of mine that I'm happy to pass around and let everybody look at, just so you can see kind of what that document looks like and what to expect. Usually they are several pages long most of the time. The copy that I brought in is actually just a copy of the cover, so that you guys will see how that first page is going to look and what you should be on the lookout for when you're looking for land grant files.
Are they recorded in the courthouse?
Sometimes, it depends on the courthouse. Some have been burned, like Martin County was a burned area, a burned county. So unfortunately, a lot of any of those documents that were stored here are gone. So it really just depends on the county. Pension applications are great. Usually those only apply to the widows or children of a Revolutionary War soldier. And usually those are only done after their passing most of the time, or at least that tends to be very common. But as I was saying, DAR and SAR registrars will help you guys complete your application. They'll submit everything for you, signed, sealed, delivered. They'll help you get those documents. That is what they're there for. So if you're having trouble getting your hands on stuff and you want to join and do an application, they'll help you do everything they can to prove that lineage.
So you can't really find a whole lot yourself, rather than any of your ancestors were.
You can. You absolutely can. Yes, ma'am. So
Martin County is good, the register of food farms is very good for finding that kind of information.
yes, they are. Yes. Also, you can find a lot of these documents online these days. Ancestry, like I was saying earlier, if you have a paid subscription, you can generally view those documents. It's just a matter of making sure that it has the correct information, you're looking at the right person, and that it's an acceptable document for that kind of, proof, if that makes any sense.
Is it just gonna go by the dates, or, because it's not gonna say American Revolution?
Correct, yeah. Usually you'll see things like Continental Line, Continental, Army, stuff like that, militia, like you'll tend to look for those like words and vocabulary from that time.
So if you have multiple, like, let's say you've got 3 rows and 4, you just do the one that's the easiest to prove, or
Well,
can you
usually
join under multiple, or?
you can absolutely join under multiple. Now, you do have to do an application for each one, which means that you do have to pay that application fee. But you can absolutely do that, that is a possibility.
You have to join first on one,
On
Yes.
one,
and then supplementals
Yes,
after that.
that's correct. And I'm sorry, I'm trying to, what was the first part of that that you asked? It was about if you have,
Just multiple.
yeah,
You got it.
okay, that's it, okay, just making
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, just multiple.
Oh, okay. We're at a point, we can stop, can we stop right here?
I just wanted to tell this lady right here, if she's not ready to jump into paying for Ancestry yet, FamilySearch.org is free.
Yes, it absolutely.
Absolutely free, and you can get tons of information from there.
I
Yeah,
have Ancestry, I've had it for like 10, 12 years.
Well,
I made a mistake and started putting things in that people had told me,
Sure,
as you
sure.
said. I'm ready to wipe all that out and start all over.
Well,
I
use
just did that
FamilySearch.org because that information, comes from, the Church of Latter-day Saints, and they have the most extensive, records.
That's where Ancestry gets their information from too, though.
Yeah.
I think it's owned by Ancestry, but that's where they get theirs
They
as
have
well.
combined.
Yeah.
did I get everybody, I'm sorry, everybody? Thank you.
Census records be used as part of that documentation?
I do believe they can, is that?
They can be.
If you don't have another source?
Right. It's like at certain times and certain years, the census records gave certain information, not the same every
Correct.
single time.
It's strange that way because if you're, intimately familiar with census documents, it seems like every single time they did a census, the record changed and the way that it looked and the information it presented, it all changed. So once you get to about the mid-1800s, right around 1840 and 50, all of a sudden you start seeing census records when they get older and go further back, they no longer have the names from everybody in the family. Now it's just, we're gonna show the name of the head of the household, which was usually the man, and then it would have a column with numbers of people who were this race and this age, and this race and this age, and there were no names, and it was very vague, right? But as we got further along, things started updating, and we got more information, and things got clearer, and obviously that's great. So you just have to kind of pick your battles on that.
Wasn't it the 1910 census that would list whether you were in the Revolutionary War, Civil War?
I haven't seen that myself.
I got that off somewhere.
Okay.
I wrote it down.
If you're able to find that, I'd love to see it.
Okay.
So, when I first started doing some genealogy down here, I was told that the courthouse here burned up in what, like 1913 or something?
So
And a lot of records were
It
lost.
wasn't that far back.
It wasn't.
I was in elementary school when it burned.
and that I believe was the second time.
Oh, okay.
Because I
Yeah,
think if I
the
remember
courthouse in
correctly.
Martin County burned in 1885.
Yes.
84, 85, yeah. I mean, and the deeds were pretty much saved. It was a lot of all the extraneous records that we don't have that other counties have, maybe like the records concerning, the people that worked on the roads and all that type of thing or whatever, and we don't have tax records a lot, but the deeds you can pretty much access. I mean, we certainly have lost things over the years for various reasons, but you can, and they are available online. You can go on there and you can, the search mechanism is a little quirky, but once you get used to it, you can, you play with it long enough, you can do a lot with it. Just a matter of reading the writing sometimes is, so, I mean, even when you can blow it up, sometimes it's tough.
Right, right.
Amen.
See, I was told, like, when you were saying that everybody was told when they were a child they were part of the Cherokee or Indian,
Right.
and so of course I look at my grandma and I'm like, oh yeah, I can see it,
Right.
you can always see it. But, so when I went to the courthouse at the time, and that's when they were telling me about that it had burned up and everything, they were saying that, like, everybody was listed black or white. And Indians could have fell under the black, or they could have fell under an other.
That's true, and I've seen a variety. Yeah, I've seen a variety of other listings as well, like mulatto, or sometimes depending on how they look, they may have been white passing, they may have been listed as white, it just depends. That's a good one. So let's talk about some local chapters. Now, you're gonna notice something here, hopefully pretty immediately. So I've broken this down between Daughters of the American Revolution chapters and Sons of the American Revolution chapters. Which of these lists is bigger? Daughters, yeah. So if you were to look on the official website for the Daughters of the American Revolution, you will notice that the map of all the local chapters in North Carolina is full, active. There's a lot of them. Not quite as much for the Sons of the American Revolution, but there's still several around. So we definitely have our pick of the lot when it comes to the Daughters. So first, we have the Micaiah Petaway Halifax Resolves chapter. They're located in Rocky Mount. Myself and my mom are both members of that one, and it was named after the patriot that they often tend to track members' lineage through, which was Micaiah Petaway, and he is our ancestor as well. There's also the Eatonton Tea Party chapter close by. The Susanna Cotanch Evans chapter, which is located in Greenville, and the Brick House Landing chapter in Plymouth, also close by, and of course the Grimes Mayo chapter here in Williamston, which I'm sure our ladies are probably part of this local chapter here. Yep. For the Sons local chapters, we have the General George Washington chapter. I believe that was in Little Washington, I want to say. It might be Greenville, I could be wrong about that.
I think it's Greenville.
There's the Albemarle chapter and the Halifax Resolves chapter. And of course, the Halifax Resolves was located in Halifax County.
I would love to know what chapter everybody in here, the sons and daughters that belong to, if you have a minute to go in and ask
Yeah,
that.
I mean, that's fine as long as everybody's comfortable with that. We don't have any issues with that. Okay. I'll start us off. So I'm part of the Micaiah Petaway Halifax Resolves.
Grimes Mayo.
Micaiah Petaway.
Grimes
Grimes
Mayo.
Mayo.
Okay.
So we've only got the two in here right now.
Do you have any sons?
I guess not.
Not
We gotta work on that.
Not yet.
So hopefully this will help clear up some things for everybody. Maybe we can get some more members going in here. They do have an annual fee, generally speaking, just FYI. Once you're a member, you're always a member, and they will tell you that from the moment that you sign up. So like, once a member, always a member, right? They do have local chapter membership dues that are expected to be paid just to kind of help with upkeep of things. They do a lot of volunteer work and a lot of services for the local area, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But these are some common questions that get asked. So first of all, how much does membership cost? Okay. So you do have to pay a federal application fee. I believe that's to the tune of $79, $80 for the federal application. Then you have to pay your local chapter dues, and those will heavily vary depending on your chapter. So those are all going to be different. So to start off with, you're going to be looking somewhere in the ballpark of about 150 to 170 depending on your chapter.
And there are state dues and district dues as well.
Yes, as well. Yep. So you'll pay a little bit to start off with just to get in. But once you've got your application in and approved, that money falls off, and the money that you pay every year after that, obviously, we're going to take off that application fee, and that'll be that. A lot of people ask if they can use their siblings or parents' application as their own. They'll say, oh, well, you know, my dad is a member, my sister is a member, can I just use their information and join with, you know, together with them? Every single person, every single prospective member has to have their own application. But if you do have somebody in the family, closely related, immediate family, that has already had an approved application, we can then take the research that has been verified from that application and apply it to yours. So we can't just use their application as your own, but we can take that verified info and pull it over for yours. So that's the thing, it'll make your application a lot quicker and easier. Can I join if I am adopted? That's a wonderful question. Yes, but there's a caveat to that. It has to be done through your birth parents. So we get this question a lot. Unfortunately, you're not really able to do an application through your adoptive parents, which kind of sucks.
Bloodline.
But it's
Bloodline.
based on bloodlines. It is a genealogical society, so this is kind of how things go. Some people don't particularly care for that, and that's perfectly fine. It is personal preference, but that's essentially how that goes. So if you have that information about your birth parents, or if they are listed on your birth certificate, and we can prove that lineage through them, that's wonderful. We're going to go ahead and do that. Now, it does sometimes depend, because there are certain situations where, let's say, for example, if you had a closed adoption and the information about your birth parents is not available, or perhaps your adoption record is not even public record at this point, and nobody knows that you were adopted, and it looks on your birth certificate like your adoptive parents were your birth parents, right? If nobody's able to tell, sometimes an application may be able to go through. It just depends. So that's one of those things you kind of have to play by ear.
The application itself says, I am the biological child of.
Right. Yes.
So,
Yeah. So it is intended to be
biological.
yes. Next question. My grandmother, grandfather has passed on. Can they still become a member? Now, this was actually a question that I had initially asked when I joined a few years ago. No, is the short answer. However, they can be recognized posthumously at their gravesite, on their headstone, or if maybe, let's say, if they were cremated and you have their ashes, you can have something put on the base. So that is something you can do just to recognize them, but we can't do a member application for them or anything to that effect. But if they were on that line between yourself and your patriot, then we can do that. So just do keep that in mind. Yes?
I have a crazy question.
Go for it.
Which comes first, the chicken or the egg? In the sense that, let's say I do my investigation.
Mm-hmm.
How do I know that my ancestor back then was a Tory or?
Most of the time, yeah, so
fault?
most of the time those documents will say what side they were on or what way they, aided the war.
So once I get back that far, there'll be something that says uncle, great uncle, or great granddaughter was a Tory.
Generally speaking, there will be some kind of indicator. It won't be immediately clear. It may not say verbatim, so-and-so was this or was on this side, but it may list them as a Tory or a loyalist or something to that effect. So it depends on the document, it depends on who wrote it and what was going on at the time. These are those kinds of things that you just have to read very carefully and look for certain vocabulary.
Are there documents that list everybody who was a loyalist?
Sometimes. I would say those generally tend to be few and far between in my experience. I haven't really run across a whole lot of that.
Okay.
There were some, but not very many.
But you're proving whether it be the thing connection to military service or assistance with the war. I mean, it really, that's not going to make any, the loyalist aspect, the proof is just going to be that paper piece of evidence that connects you that way, and that should, if there's,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, so for example, and I think this is along the lines of what you're talking about, if they had a pension application or a land grant file, that obviously is gonna mean that they were, you know, on the US's side, right? They were one of the Revolutionary Patriots and not a loyalist or a Tory.
Right.
So that's another good thing too. It really just depends on the type of documentation that you're looking at. That's cool. Any other related questions to our STAR chapters?
I'll say one thing, for DAR, there's so much information on their website.
Yes.
SAR is not, there's not, so it makes it a lot more difficult
Yeah, and
to get to that.
I'm actually glad you brought that up. So, unfortunately, STAR does not have a lot of information readily available, just kind of in general. Additionally, I will also say that the application requirements are a little bit different between the two. For example, if you're joining the Sons, then it may be a little bit easier to get that document approved. Now, when I say that, take that with a grain of salt. What I really mean is, if you're trying to figure out like what it was that your ancestor did in order to make them eligible for you to join this group, for example, let's say if they lent their tea kettle to one of the soldiers in war as they were passing by so that they could, you know, make coffee or something, right? Sometimes that is an acceptable thing for the Sons. They will say, okay, well, your ancestor aided the war, you know, this was a documented thing, it was small, but it was helpful to them at the time, so we'll take that. Daughters is definitely a little more discerning. They probably are not gonna accept something like that. Now, if you, let's say you lent your wagon to the local militia or to the Continental Line that was coming through so that they could transport supplies and soldiers, that's a little bit different. That's kind of a bigger deal, right? Like you're directly aiding their efforts, right? That would definitely be more acceptable. So those requirements for application and proving that application are a little bit different between the two. So let's talk a little bit about the three of the things that these two groups really focus on. So first and foremost is going to be historical preservation. So one of the biggest things that we do is historical landmark and cemetery restoration and preservation. When I do historical cemetery and preservation, generally speaking, it's either for myself, just on a voluntary basis, because it is something that I enjoy doing, or it is for a client who has specifically requested it. SAR and DAR do these things as voluntary services to the local community. So this is something that you can do for their group and for your benefit. Grants are available through both of these organizations for those kinds of projects. So please do keep that in mind if that's something you're interested in. They can be larger grants depending on the size of your project. Usually they tend to be smaller, but I mean, any amount helps, right? Especially when you're working on a larger project. Education, they're very, very big on this. DAR in particular does a lot of educational organizations and programs throughout the school year, even over the summer. They have various different youth programs that are available. They advertise all of these things on their official website. Please do go take a look at those things. They do give out scholarships to graduating high school seniors. They have essay contests, and they have lots of teacher resources, particularly for history and culture and things like that. They do a lot of service and volunteerism. They assist our local military veterans, both for the older and sometimes even deceased military veterans. Maybe we go and put wreaths on their headstones, or maybe we go to the local, what's the word I'm looking for, nursing home, and find the veterans there, and we take things to them and spend time with them and stuff like that. But even also for the active duty military. They host lots of food drives and canned food drives. They have lots of different volunteer opportunities. I know there was just recently for our chapter, there was a doll making event back in November, I think it was, and they showed, like they had somebody come in and they showed you how people used to make dolls back in the early 1700s and, you know, what some of those dolls were for and so on and so forth, because, you know, there was a whole bunch of stuff for that. But yeah, they have lots of different things going on. So take a look at the website because there's a lot of information there. Okay, I do believe we're getting on towards the end of the presentation now. This is my contact info. Please give me a call or a text anytime you're ready. If you have a question about anything, don't hesitate to reach out. I do have a Facebook and a TikTok account, and the bottom is my email address. So please feel free, like I said, reach out anytime you have questions or concerns about anything. I'm more than happy to help. And I do believe, yeah, that's it. Okay.
Would you back up? Can you back up?
Yeah, I sure can.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. There we go.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
For the SAR, I don't know if this is done through them, but is it something Cincinnati or something, there was an officers group,
Yeah, well, Cincinnati, out of Philadelphia.
is that connected to the SAR or the D, is that part of the?
So if I had to take a guess, I would say probably not. It sounds like they're just gonna be a separate.
That's a separate group entirely.
I think so. Now, I could be wrong about that, so don't quote me. I don't really know a lot about it, but if I had to guess, I'd say they're probably separate.
It's separate, and that's for officers.
That's, yeah, I'm not sure, I was just thinking maybe if we had come out of the DAR, SAR group.
Right.
Apparently, it evolved on its own,
Yeah.
auspices, yeah.
Right, yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good question though, because there's actually other groups that are similar to that for the daughters as well. I have seen that kind of thing before, so it is, I wouldn't say overly common, but it does exist.
There's nothing special in the DAR, SAR that recognizes the officer branches, or there's not any,
I don't think there is, at least not that I'm aware of. I've never heard of anything to that effect before. Have you? He said, is there anything like special for the officers of the war that, like, is there any kind of recognition for daughters or sons for those officer? Yeah, I hadn't heard of anything like that before. Yeah, that's a good question though. Any others?
I have a question, ma'am.
Okay.
Is there any objection to grace before we have the meeting?
I have no objection.
Is there any?
No objections.